Good evening, and welcome to a special 15-minute edition of Facebook Live, where we'll be discussing how to keep you and your practice safe during these trying times. I'm Gerard Santinelli of Santinelli International.
And I'm Norm Kester of Quantum Innovations. And just a little bit of housekeeping for everybody. We've only got 15 minutes, so it's going to go by really fast. We've got a lot to cover. So if you have questions, put them in the chat, and we'll try to get back to them after this is all over. So just a little bit about us and our partnership. We were already trying to work together with Santinelli, and we really thought that our companies work really well together. We're both really customer-centric, very service-oriented organizations, and we were looking for a way for us to partnership together before all this happened. And then when this happened with the pandemic and with this particular product, we thought, wow, this is it. This is our time.
And this is such an important issue and clearly an important product. And we're so proud to affiliate our Santinelli brand and reputation with a company such as Quantum and their product, the FusionUV. Norm, the history and the background and development of your product is so fascinating. Why don't you give us a few minutes of that background and how it was born?
Yeah, so when the pandemic hit and everybody was trying to, everybody was struggling to try and figure out what to do, and I was sitting on the couch talking to my wife, and I thought, wait a minute, we got to figure out how to jump into this fight. And all my Instagram notes and LinkedIn said, get in the fight, all that stuff. But I reached out to some of the CEOs of the local hospitals, and another gentleman did as well. And pretty soon we started a group called the MacGyver Group, where we were trying to figure out how to make the ventilators work and manifolds and positive pressure in the hospitals and doing all these different things. And one of the major things was, how can you make the N95 masks and gowns last longer? And no matter what we did to try and make those things locally, we couldn't make them fast enough or at scale. So we got down to, we needed to reuse them. Vaporized hydrogen peroxide and UVC were the two technologies that emerged. Long story short, we bought a 20-foot shipping container and retrofitted that with UVC. And we demonstrated that for the hospital. We were able to kill the coronavirus very quickly. We built 3 of those for the local hospitals, and then we tried to figure out how we could put it into a package and get it to the doctors on their benches, or get them to dentists or other people. And then we eventually ended up with this little box.
Fascinating. Fascinating. How about a demonstration and a little overview of your FusionUV, Norm?
Sure. And one thing I forgot to mention as I was going through that story was the name BOON came from an acronym as I was trying to figure out what to name the company as we started a separate division. It just kept coming back to the notes I was writing. Was this whole thing was born out of necessity. So that's where the name BOON came from. It's an acronym. So first of all, you want to wear gloves because you don't want to put finger oils inside the box. This is, of course, the UVC box. Got a little timer on the front, light here to tell you that it's working, and then power switch cord. It's pretty simple. The whole box, I think, weighs 16 pounds, something in that range. So this is what it's going to look like from the inside. Here we have a very highly reflective material. Even though it's reflective in the visible light, that's not really the most important attribute. It's very reflective in the UVC range. So this is a range, of course, you can't see with your eyes. So very special material. That's why there's special cleaning required. This is a mercury vapor lamp that generates 254 nanometer UVC, germicidal UV wavelength of light. And then we have very special rods here that transmit in the UV. So this is very important. This is UVC transmissive material. There's only a few on Earth that are going to transmit 80+% of light. And then we have another bulb on the bottom, which you probably can't see from this angle. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take our frames, we're going to put them in the box. And then you can hold 12 frames. Now, if you have small frames like I'm wearing, you obviously could fit more in, probably in the 16 range. There's an interlock here that goes down and goes through a hole here, which depresses that, starts the box working. It's pretty simple. We're going to close this when you've loaded it, turn it on for 1 minute, and then it's going to run and inactivate the virus. Now, how it's actually working is we are going to transmit, or we're going to emit UVC light, 254 nanometer light, and it is going to go into the RNA. In the case of viruses, it can be DNA, and it's going to scramble the RNA of those microorganisms and keep them from replicating. If a virus can't replicate, it can't infect you, so then it's then rendered dead. So the nice thing with this particular thing, of course, there's no byproduct, there's no residue, there's nothing left over. And the other thing to note is something to think about. And the reason why no microorganisms have a protection to UVC is that our atmosphere filters out 100% of UVC coming from the sun. So we only get UVA and UVB here on Earth. So that's why microorganisms don't have any protection to this particular wavelength of light. It is also the oldest wavelength of light that has been used as a germicidal. This 254 nanometers. It's been around for 90 some years and been used to clean water and in air purification. So it's a very old technology as well.
Norm, you've learned so much in the few months since this crisis has hit, and so many questions have arisen, and we'd like to share some impart some of your knowledge, if we could, to the group tonight. Norm, some of the questions that we often get, can I put special frame materials in it, like acetate and horn?
Yeah, this is a very short wavelength light, so it has a really difficult time penetrating objects. So that's why, like a multi-layered fabric, it's not going to really get in deep into that fabric. It's a very short wavelength light, so it works really well on the surface. If you did put it in here for some crazy amount of time, you could generate heat eventually, and that could cause something to break down. But remember that this is going to inactivate the virus in seconds. So we're putting it in here for 60 seconds because based on the geometry, we're trying to get every angle all the way around the frame, all the lenses on the nose pad, in the hinge point. So in order to do that, we tell you that you need to use it for 1 minute. But in that time frame, we're not going to damage pretty much any material. We've tested leathers, plastics, all versions of plastics, all types of metals. Like I said, I think we tried camel the other day, wood, all sorts of different things. So it hasn't damaged anything yet.
Now, I think you mentioned it during the demo, Norm. How many frames can it hold? And what other things other than frames can be put inside and sterilized?
Yeah, so you could put just about anything you want in there, and disinfect is the right term. We don't want to change terms, but disinfect is what we're doing here. But yeah, I mean, we have two different levels here. So this is a level for frames, but you can actually lower the rods down, and you could put your iPad in there, your cell phone, your car keys. You could put any number of devices in here. One of the demos that I like to do is I lower it down. I put my cell phone in there, and then I close the door and shoot a video of it actually working. So you can actually disinfect any number of objects that you want in there. 12 to 16 frames, depending on the size. If you have larger size, you're going to get 12. If you have smaller size, you can get 16 in there.
Norm, are there tests showing its effectiveness?
Sure, we have a number of tests. Not only the tests that we've done, we've also thankfully had some partnerships with some other folks in our industry that are in Italy, and they at the peak of the pandemic in Italy, they had this UV box over there, and not only were we able to kill the coronavirus very early on, but we were able to inactivate a whole host of other pathogens and microbes. And we've done it here as well. University of Tennessee, thankfully, was a great partner to us. And the University of Tennessee, Knoxville has a BSL-3 lab. That's a biosafety level 3 lab. So it can deal with very terrible germs. And they tested it. And that's the place that really got us to understand how fast we were inactivating the virus. So we were inactivating it in just seconds. And then we sent it to another lab where where we were able to kill some other things as well.
Incredible. And, referring, and in the spirit of separating fact and fiction in tonight's Facebook Live, you referred to, I refer to them as those kryptonite rods that are extremely proprietary, Norm, to your development. And we've all seen a lot of units on Amazon, and we've seen these wands and these units that have metal trays or plastic sides to them. What would you say about the construction of that description and these exposed metal wands that you see marketed out there quite often?
Yeah, and I think that there's a case and a place for all these different things. And the thing that we all have to consider is the amount of time that it takes to inactivate the virus is dependent on the power it generates, the wavelength of light it generates, and the distance that light generation source is from the object. The other thing that we have to think about, and there's a simple math formula to figure that out. If anybody wants that, you can put it in the chat and we'll get back to you. Anytime, if I were to put this frame on this right here, the place where the frame is touching the metal would get no UVC activation. So we wouldn't be able to kill the virus there. That's why we spent so much time trying to figure this out, because most objects that are out there, they have you set this on a metal tray or something, or you put it in the bottom. Well, if you do that, you're just going to have to flip it over. So if it's an LED-based device that takes somewhere between 3 and 15 minutes, depending on the LEDs and the wavelength and how many LEDs, well, then you've got to take it out, flip it over, and do it again. So that's why this is so advantageous, is you get it 360 degrees all the way around. And that's really why it took us a little while to get all this perfected, because this particular little rod is hard to find. It's hard to figure out what can work like that. So.
And Norm, speaking, you pointed out earlier to the upper and the lower bulbs. How long do those bulbs last for?
So those bulbs are going to last 8,000 runtime hours is what they're supposed to last. So, and this whole device, by the way, is made in Oregon. We designed it. The metal here is stamped in Oregon. We assemble it in Oregon. There's a few parts that aren't made in the U.S., but almost all of it is from its conception all the way through. So,
made in the good old USA. No.
Yep, absolutely.
Another question we hear a lot is, does the unit produce ozone?
That's a good question, because there is a smell that comes in the device, and that's actually just a transference of energy. When you have this much energetic light, that energy has to go somewhere. So it goes into the sidewalls, and that is translated into heat. And so there'll be a smell, but actually, and this was a big concern that we had early on learning about short wavelength UVC. So we bought an ozone meter and tested it. Well, what you find when you research it and research the science, 185 nanometers is where ozone is created, and we're up in the 254 nanometer range. So we don't create ozone inside this device.
Fantastic. And one more quick question, Norm. We have another minute or so left. We hear a lot of noise about practices using their transition light box. Is that effective?
No, it's not. And you can just Google that. There's no science to support that, especially UVA. UVB can be used for certain germs if there is an activator involved. But UVC, there's so much science that supports the UVC is really the way to go. Now, you don't have to choose this particular wavelength. You can go all the way up to 265, and you can go down a little bit as well. There's a very interesting wavelength of light, 222. That's not harmful to the skin. Unfortunately, it's still thousands of dollars for a bulb. Eventually it'll get there. That science will get there as well.
Norm, fantastic. Very, very interesting. And for all you listeners out there, we'd like to invite you to visit our website, siosopticalppe.com/Facebook Live. There you'll find a slew of valuable information and more in-depth videos on the FusionUV. But for now, and for a limited time, you can order the UV now at siosopticalppe.com and receive a free sample of our groundbreaking no-fog microfiber cloths. So that's Sios, S-I-O-S, optical, PPE.com. You and your patients will absolutely love the Fusion UV, and the no fog cloths. Or you can call us at 855-644-7467. That's 855-644-7467. Or again, order online at siosopticalppe.com. Folks, thank you so much for allowing us into your homes and joining us tonight for the special live edition of Facebook on ODs on Facebook. And stay tuned for future events, for new exciting products that we'll be introducing. Thanks for joining us and have a great evening. Norm, wonderful as always working with you.
Yeah, thanks, Gerard, and thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Good night, folks.
Good night.